Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the day two and the finale of this AI-driven bootcamp. So we have done the launch event so far on 10th of September. Yesterday we had two sessions by Sahil and Kaustuba ma'am, and today we have our final session by Varun sir, who is the Director of Engineering at Tush Telecom Digital Labs. So about today, we are diving deep into the advanced testing techniques and the implementation of AI integration and how you can automate the test cases. So before we dive into that, I'll just quickly recap that it is mandatory for everyone who is looking for a certification to fill the quizzes, the mandatory quiz, which is circulated already in your emails for both the sessions here from yesterday. And the quiz for today's session will also be live right after the session. So you need to fill all the quizzes and submit a minimum of 5 bucks to get the certificate of completion. And the winners' bucks are always there, which is around FS passes, be it your swags and goodies hampers, as well as the internship and job opportunity. So make sure you give your best, and we'll further be deep diving into what all are the awesome perks for today. So today is the last day of submission, so make sure you have your Google Sheet ready. We have shared the template over email, and you can also join our WhatsApp community group, which is mentioned in your email already. We'll be sending another email after this session where you will get all the recordings of previous sessions, the WhatsApp group link. And by 11:59 p.m. today, you are supposed to submit the Google Sheet link with the template. Let me just quickly show it to you. So those who have just joined, this is the Google Sheet that you need to work upon. Append your bugs, delete these rows. These are the sample data. You can delete it. This is just for a reference. Start putting a minimum of 5 bugs in this sheet. Make sure to enter your correct details in this second subsheet. And how to use this? You won't get the edit access to this sheet. You need to create a copy from here and then upload it. And before sharing, make sure it is having a public access. You click on the share icon and make sure that it has a public access, viewer access for everyone. So this is a mandatory step, else you won't be able to access your files and your submission will be as good as a none. So that's about submission, and all the best. So may the best person win. So this is a learning endeavor for you all, and I believe over the past days we have all been learning a new technologies, a lot of new topics, and this is something which has been a great learning experience, I believe, for me personally and for everyone who is attending this session. So without any further delay, and I would like to bring up on the stage Varun sir, who will be taking the finale session and the advanced track for this QA bootcamp.
Hi, Avnish. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone to take out Sunday morning to join this. Really appreciate it. Just to quickly give a background about me. So I am part of Deutsche Telekom, where I am the director of engineering. I'm responsible for their e-commerce side of things, both mobile and web. Before this, I was working with Tata Digital, the Tata New app. I was responsible for investment side of things from tech, and I've also been a CTO at Grip Invest, which is an early stage startup. So that's a very quick introduction about me. I'll quickly start by I'm not sure how do I share my screen here.
There's an option right next to your video icon. From there you can.
Uh, Not able to see it here.
In the
Ah,
footer where you have the video
yeah,
icon,
okay,
right next to it.
okay, yeah, just got it. All right, let's get into it. So I'll quickly start with a couple of slides. Won't get too much into slides. We'll deep dive into the to actual demos and couple of tools which I can talk about and do a live demo around. So let's talk about the traditional testing. So there are multiple testing types from a traditional testing or a QA perspective. But if you think about a QA person, whether an SDET or a manual tester, There are two areas which usually takes up most of the times. If say you are building a web app, which is the API testing. So backend, which is the core of the system which provides data. So to test, understand what the request and response is coming along, the data integrity, if the API or if the UI expects date to be in a certain format, for example, or certain numbers should be in certain decimal points, to understand whether the backend systems or the APIs are providing the right amount and right format of data, and of course the performance monitoring, whether they are the APIs are returning in an acceptable SLA. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, especially when you're working on the web testing side of things, is to check if the UI functionality, what was expected, is correct. It is responsive, and last but not the least, it is working throughout the browsers. If I talk about my journey when we started, there were browsers which were quite different. Internet Explorer were quite different to say Firefox, to say Chrome. Now browsers are a lot similar depending on what you're using, but still the idea is to test it across the browsers. So these are the two flavors majorly QA testers spend time on validating if you're especially working on a web application. Generally speaking, this has been the evolution of QA, where we started with manual testing, somebody coming in, writing the test cases, manually validating the application, and then raising bugs. It was time consuming, it is still time consuming, prone to human errors, and can take longer cycles. Then came the automated testing, where we tried to write scripts to replicate what a manual tester does, and then reduce the human effort to an extent where if you are a DevOps heavy organization, then these scripts can run every time a change is made and can identify if something went wrong. The times we live in, right, are more around everywhere AI is coming into picture, and QA is one area where it is also very much applicable. The idea is to generate intelligent tests to understand the context of the system, what we are trying to do new as a feature, and then build test cases around it, and also understand the application and predict potential issues. This shift essentially introduces more adaptive, more dynamic side of things, tries to reduce the flakiness or the kind of tests you usually run once, become successful, but then fail. So I'll skip this part. One area I wanted to talk about before we get into the tools is model context protocol. Why is it important here? And the folks who have been active in AI domain might have, especially in Gen AI, might have heard about model context protocol. Why is it important? So every system, if you think about it, the LLM is trained on internet data, generic data, and you can ask it questions about generic stuff. But if you ask a question about your own specific system, your specific application, it doesn't know. It hasn't been trained to understand your application. So how do you take a generic LLM or a generic Gen AI model to to a model that understands your application and can say generate test cases and run test cases according to what your application is all about? And that is where MCP comes into picture. Think of MCP as a USB-C port for your LLM, where you can connect your documentation, your actual application, any any relevant information which you want to provide when an LLM is taking decisions via model context protocol. Say you want to connect your browser, say you have a PRD, your Jira or your feature requests, or a PRD, which is a documentation coming from product, and you want to give that information to your LLM before it takes decision. That is where the gap, that generic LLM to understanding your system LLM comes into picture. So that is where model context protocols or MCPs comes into picture. Now, I've already covered this, Why does it matter? Because it eliminates the false results. It grounds your AI to understand what your application is all about. Otherwise, the the problem with LLMs or AI is that it won't clearly say that it doesn't know something. It'll give false answers. It'll hallucinate, as it is called in the AI world, and then it'll give false positives and negative, leading to unreliable outcomes. If you want to adapt, if you want your system to be self-healing and adaptive, to keep on understanding what your system is evolving. So system is your application. The system you're testing is always dynamic. There are new features coming in. There are old features which are being removed. If you want your application to be connected to your LLM and LLM keep on understanding what is changing, that is where the test resilience comes into picture, and that's where MCP can and or context providing context to your frameworks can help. Let's talk about the first tool I wanted to talk about. So one of the challenges which we had in my current organization and in earlier organizations as well was, how do you capture what an API is doing? So there are two ways you can test an API. You can understand what an API does, takes its swagger, and then build your understanding that this field should do this, XYZ field should do Y. But more often than not, that covers 60 to 70% of the use cases. And the real scenario when it actually runs, say, in production, the behavior is different. The options and the way the APIs are called are very different. Hence, we decided that let's try out something AI based that can A, capture what is being done, B, then replicate it, and whenever this behavior changes, call it out very clearly that this behavior has changed and something is wrong. Now, two things can happen when behavior changes. One, somebody has introduced something which is causing this behavior to break. The second aspect could be that this behavior has genuinely changed and we need to update our test cases. But even then, if we are able to identify that this is the time to change our test cases, is also very important. I'll give a very simple example of Keploy. So Keploy is a tool which gives you, and it's an open source tool. It gives you an option of generating API tests using AI. Not only that, it gives you an option of capturing if a manual user is using the application, capture the behavior, and then replicate the behavior using your test scripts. And I'll give you an example of how it does. So for the demo purposes, I've created a very simple to-do app. So to-do apps are usually the uh, the the hello world of applications. So if I show you a very quick demo of this to-do app, nothing fancy, a flash-based app, does nothing. But I would suggest, if you really want to run the application and learn how to test, it's always good to build something of your own and learn by doing rather than just doing theory. Now, Keploy gives two options of testing the application. One is to record what a user is doing. So if you see, uh, the Keploy application has started, and it has started recording and started capturing the test cases for user application. Let's do simple stuff, right? I will add, say, first task, right? I just added, and I'll add another task, right? So this is basic use case of a to-do app to be able to add few tasks. The other fairly simple is that you are able to update a task, right? So I updated a task and it updated. The third simple application use case is to delete a task, which I did. So I deleted it. Now, if I show the logs, I'm hoping you guys are able to see my logs. Amnish, if just let me know if you're able to see my screen of the logs.
Yeah, the to-do
Yeah.
list is available.
Are the logs are also
No, I guess logs are not visible.
I will just try to share again. Just give me 1 second. Uh, Now,
No. It's a dark screen right now.
Just give me 1 second. Sorry. Now is it better?
Yeah, this is
Are
better.
you able to see my logs?
Yeah, the screen right now, this window is available. The
Okay,
hosting.
I will paste the logs and I'll show you guys. Uh, or I is there any other way where I can actually share my whole thing rather than just the browser window? Something wrong with the
Okay, I guess
way.
we can add it in a notepad or something. That would be
Yeah,
better.
just give me 1 second. So, are you able to see my notepad? No, right? For
Let's
some
see.
reason, it's just allowing me to share my only my browser screen.
Uh, Got it. We can just open a new docs.new. We can open in a new tab of Google
I
Doc
will
and
just yeah, I'll just do
we
a
can
Google Doc.
paste over there. So that
Yeah,
this will do.
yeah. So just for the for the folks who were not able to see the logs. So whenever I did something right, Keploy on the back end was able to capture multiple test cases. So for example, so I started Keploy in the backend while starting the application. I started with something called Keploy record, and then it started. I started the application with Kepler record, just wrapping it with Keploy, saying that whatever I'm doing, just record it and capture it as test cases. So leveraging AI, it is capturing my network traffic, whatever call is coming to the backend, and it started creating the test cases, and it has created around 11, 12 test cases around the adding of a task, updating of a task, deleting of tasks. It has created multiple test cases. Now, what I want to do is next time I'm running the application, I will I will just do a test rather than a a capture. So now imagine this. This test has been run on the production environment. Now you want to replicate what your actual users are doing, say in a non-prod or non-production environment while QA is testing. So this is in QA world called service virtualization, where you capture what your end user is doing in production in your actual application, and then pass it on to a lower environment so that you can replicate what is being done. So just to quickly show you again on the Google Doc. So this is how when I ran the command of just give me 1 second of testing, right? So whatever was captured, the application started running the test cases one by one, and all my test cases were passed because it essentially started calling the API with the same data, with the same understanding of what was done earlier. And then there were 15 total cases or test cases which were captured, and then they were executed. If I were to say change something in my application, right, I'll quickly do, I'll just comment out the code of deletion and I'll show you how it will fail. I would have loved if you guys can see the my logs as well. But anyways, let's just try it out once. So I just commented out the delete functionality of the application, and let's assume that somebody did some change in the deletion, which now is not working as expected. To just to show very quickly how this now captures is, it ran the test cases, but two of the test cases around deletion actually failed. Not only it failed, it actually showed that what was expected, what was the expected header, what was the expected body, and what was the actual body and what we exactly got, so that you can know that what is happening in the system, so that you can raise a bug or you can call out very clearly that this is what is going wrong in the system. I was expecting the task to be deleted. The test was expecting the task to be deleted, but at the end of the day, they were not deleted because somebody has made some mistake, and hence there were two test cases which were failed, and around 13 test cases which were passed, which was around say creation or something else. So this is one aspect where AI can be used to leverage the what we call the regression side of things. Does that any questions before we go on to the other aspect of Keploy itself? All right. So there is one aspect which usually comes along, which is around test case generation, and this is where again from an API perspective, API testing perspective, a lot lot of questions get asked that how many test cases and or how many use cases can potentially be created for an API. A very simple example of say a Google API for books, right? Now, what it does, it gets all the books related to Harry Potter if you send out a query mentioning Harry, right? Now, when you're testing this API, which fetches all the book information with some parameters, one way to test is to identify via the name. The another way is to identify via the author. One way I could think of to search books is ISDN number, which is very specific to books. And then there could be multiple ways, right? Now, these are the few ways which I could think of over the top, but there could be many more ways where you could potentially test this API. And what we've been talking about is positive scenarios or positive ways of fetching books from using this API. There could be many negative ways. What if I actually add something completely gibberish? How my API is responding? If it is giving an error as expected, or versus say it is actually giving a result which is unexpected. So how do you test multiple scenarios of a simple API to be sure that the API, when taken to production and exposed to the world, will not behave the way it is expected? So how do you generate test cases like that? So a quick way to do that is this application. Again, Keploy. It's a cloud version of the application. I've already run a lot of test cases around this, and if you see, it is actually created say around 166 test cases generating AI for this one API. What kind of test cases does it generate? Right, one is more around getting the specific book by its ID, a specific ID, and it expects it to return this book name called Brave New World by along with filtering and sorting, right? So another aspect, right, which if you're new into the system, if you're not very much aware about what this API is supposed to do, this is one test case somebody might miss easily, where if you are fetching multiple books, whether the API is able to add a parameter for filtering and sorting the books according to say when they were created, when they were added, or according to alphabetical orders. So the test case generated was that filter it according to the paid ebooks rather than free ebooks, and order by the newest side of things, and the test case was passed. Then there is another test case, it generated automatically, which was around if there are multiple books which you want, say you get a response of 1,000 books, you cannot always render 1,000 books on your UI, right? It'll just not work. So can we do pagination, where you might have seen that in a lot of websites or web applications, you see that there is 10 results which get printed, and then there is a page called 2, 3, 4. So this basically tests if the pagination works from for that particular API. Tested by a title, tested by an author, and you get the idea, right? So there are 166 scenarios. Basically, it has created not only from a functional perspective, but also from a perspective of whether the HTTP request response side of things work or not. If we send something completely out of the box, right? From a request perspective. Why is it important? Your APIs not only need to be tested from a functional perspective, from a perspective of whether they return the response which is expected, they're also supposed to be tested from a perspective of if a hacker or if somebody tries out something which is unexpected in your system, how does your system behave, right? Is also equally important. Say if they try to put in the query something which is related to your database, right? And says do a select star from users, right? Your API, your application shouldn't actually return a response or should throw an error, right? So that is equally important. So that is something sometimes we as QA folks miss, where we say that the functionality is working fine, the application is returning as per the expectation of what it's supposed to return, but that is where the skill of a QA tester comes into picture, where we try to identify or try to break the system in ways which are unexpected, because the real world throws a lot of curveballs in terms of unexpected behavior. And that is what this application via AI has been able to generate uh, for a very simple or straightforward API. To an extent, it has tried to actually get from a German language, from a French language, ask questions from that perspective, and there are multiple other APIs which or API tests which it has written. So just to reiterate, on the API side of things, what Keploy does or provides as an AI capability are two things. One is ability to record your network, say whatever it is being done from your front end, and whatever front end is communicating with your backend, to capture it as a network record, create test cases to understand what the network or what kind of calls are coming to your APIs, generate test cases according to the behavior, capture it, and give the ability to replicate these test cases whenever you want. So that's one aspect. The second aspect this tool provides, leveraging API, is that if you provide a basic understanding of your API, which is the API URL, uh, the curl or the way to call the application, the Swagger definition of your API, and any API docs. Again, context is important, right? Any API docs or any documentation which talks about what this URL is or this API is supposed to do, this will automatically use AI and automatically generate both positive and negative scenarios for your API. And now you have, in single click of the app of this application, you have around 160 170 test cases. um, just to be clear, these 160 170 test cases still might not be enough. They might be what we call edge cases, which AI might not be able to identify because it doesn't know everything about your application yet. How does one API interact with other API? And hence, it is very important to use it as a complementary tool where it can cover, say, the basics of the API test, and then you can work over and above it and write really good test cases, which an AI cannot understand because it doesn't have a complete understanding of your system yet. All right. Moving along. The next bit I wanted to talk about. So we talked about the backend testing. We talked about the API testing. What about the front end side of things? What about the web application? Again, we have this to-do app. So quickly to talk about, Playwright is one of the latest on and one of the most used frameworks. It's from Microsoft. It's an open source framework, which has been able to take over the existing well-known frameworks like Selenium and TestNG. Two reasons: it's very simple to write test cases, web behavior around it. It gives really good functionality to mimic what a user or what your end user does. It gives multiple options of, say, clicking, navigating, waiting for something to load, to understand the whole structure of how HTML is getting rendered, which is called DOM in web browser. world, and then also supports multiple browsers. So you could potentially run uh, your test case in multiple browsers at one point of time. So you could run in Firefox, in Safari, in Chrome, in all the new AI based browsers, say Comet and whatnot, and then get consolidated results and see how your application is behaving in multiple browsers and whether it is behaving in the right way or not. So that's one bit, right? And that's where the automation comes into picture. Till now, a lot of people have been writing these scripts using by manually writing the code for these scripts. And this is where 6 months back, Microsoft came up with an option of something called Playwright MCP. And going back to what we talked about MCP, Microsoft said, let's allow the Playwright functionality to connect to AI capabilities and let AI run the browser bit and understand what the application done rather than the one user doing it. Giving a very simple example, let me turn on the app again. Just give me 1 second. Now, this is my plain app. What I would do is this is some I would run. I would have wanted to for everybody to see this, but so I have an AI-based IDE called Cursor, which is connected to Playwright MCP. And what I will be doing is I'll be giving it a small context, and the context would be or a prompt would be very simple. I would be telling it there is a to-do app running on this particular URL. Generate a suite of Playwright tests with maximum 5 tests. It could generate more than 5 tests as well. Ensure to start test by deleting all the tasks before and after each test. Why is it important? That is where the the capability of QA tester comes into picture, because each test should start from blank slate so that we can run the test properly, and the generated test should not be flaky, right? So let me. I'm not sure if you guys are able to see the my. I'm assuming you're not able to see my IDE, right? Right, Avnish?
Yeah, the rule list is available, but the thumbnail is not visible.
Okay, let me just run it then. Till then, I'm happy to take any questions about deploy or API testing in general. More than happy to answer, because this will take some time.
We have some questions in the chat. Let me know when I can read them out to you.
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead.
Sure. So we have this first question from Sujal. Can you explain in simple terms how does AI help in testing software? Does it run test automatically or there's more to it?
Yes, there's more to it. Thanks for the question. So one aspect is generating test, right? It's not only about AI today has the capability to take control of your browser. So there are multiple aspects. One is, yes, running the test cases uh, for the software, where it can take control of your browser or your mobile app and simulate what a tester would do by just doing it itself by giving it a prompt. So that's one aspect. The other aspect where AI absolutely help, I would say the first point is generating the test cases, and that is where what we did with Keploy, uh, where if you have the understanding of what feature is being built, what exists in the system, and if you give this combination to the AI, it would help you understand, along with the understanding of the system of the software itself, to generate multiple test cases and give you at least 80 to 90% of coverage of what kind of test cases you want to build. And then once you have 90% test cases, then you can build on the better test cases, the more advanced edge test cases around it.
Understood. Thanks for taking that up. Next question is, how do you train AI to understand the specifics of a project? Do you have to provide it the complete code base or the documentation, and how hard is it to make it adapt to different scenarios within that software?
So, so essentially, I'll quickly come to that question. But uh, if you guys are able to see my browser, Amnish, are you able to see my browser right now?
Yeah, the to-do list is available.
Yeah. So now, if you see, this is the Playwright MCP running automatically, and it is actually generating, understanding the application, and writing the automation and running the automation automatically. What it is doing, it is trying to understand functionality, and it has automatically said that let me add a task of understanding the functionality, and doing multiple things to understand what this whole system is all about, and build a view around it, right? So if you see, what it would do is it has used something called browser navigate, then clicked on the text box, uh, added one one task. Now it is trying to update the task, uh, and it is understanding what each button does, what each functionality does, and then it will eventually delete the task. So right now it has deleted the task, and it is building the understanding of the system automatically. So to answer the previous question, right? So this is one way, although it's a simple application, but this is how the application can help build the whole understanding of the system. So it's trying to navigate multiple areas of the system, and then get the understanding of the system, and build the test cases. To answer the second question, yes, in a way, you have to give the context of the system to the application. So you don't have to train AI as such, because fine tuning Gen AI is a very nuanced thing. Training AI is a very nuanced thing. What usually you are doing is, when you're running your LLM, you're giving in its context a way to understand the specific functionality of that, which is relevant to the test cases you are trying to run. And that is where MCP comes into picture, where you can connect your say Jira or your documentation, and ask AI that every time it is running the application, right, or running the AI code, first fetch this information from the knowledge base of your system, and get the information, understand the system, and then take a decision. How difficult it is, I think once you understand the nuances of fetching this information, I think it's a repeatable task, and it is a very dynamic task where the system can every time understand and build that, and get that new information every time.
Got it. So next up we have, if something goes wrong in AI-driven testing, who fixes it? Is it more of a software bug that needs debugging, or testers have to step in and roll back the whole build?
It has to be testers. See, I'll be very honest. This is one question which comes along a lot of time. That what does whatever AI does, if something goes wrong, what do we do? You have to understand one thing and keep it in mind very clearly. You in current capabilities of Gen AI models, you have to consider AI as an intern or as a completely new QA tester or a developer. And what does that mean? That means that it becomes more important from a skill perspective, for a developer or a QA tester to actually review what AI is doing. So whatever you're leveraging AI for, you should not and never blindly put it in your production system and take it forward. You should always ensure that you're reviewing it and correcting it, and also helping AI understand that what correction needs to be done, rather than just blindly trusting it. So it will always be responsibility of the QA tester, but the role changes in the sense that you are now a reviewer, you're now the expert who's helping AI to do the right thing.
Understood. So just building on top of that, like let's say I had given a chat prompt and it gave me some test cases and it injected some code which broke my functionality. Now, do I delete that agent or rebuild the one, or I just tell them what went wrong and how I fix it so that it can iterate on top of it?
It depends. Most of the times, so there are two tricks to it. One, always always work on small changes when you're working with AI rather than a system-wide change, right? So that it is able to understand a specific area, and secondly, it is able to do smaller changes. If the change was 70 to 80% correct but it failed in 20% case, then because it is already understanding and it is continuing, more often than not you actually make it understand where it went wrong and continue with it rather than reverting it back completely, because there is no guarantee that the next time AI actually does the same thing from scratch, it will do the right thing. So it's always helpful to make AI understand where it went wrong and actually improve on it.
Understood. Awesome. So, next question is when using AI for testing, do you need a lot of data, training, and the whole documentation right away, or we can give it small test cases and it can learn on the go?
Uh, if the feature is not that complex, and you can always small with start with a small set of test cases, but it also depends on the complexity of the system. Giving a simple example, this to-do list, I never gave any documentation because it's a very generic application which is understood by the underlying LLM by default, right? But if it's a very specific niche functionality or use case for your organization, then starting with basic acceptance criteria or understanding of what output is expected from the feature where that is being built, that is a bare minimum you should start with. And as the complexity starts, you should then go to the providing the whole documentation side of things. So you can always start small, but depends on how much nuanced the feature or how much niche the application is. The idea is that you should at least give the basic expectation of the behavior of the output from the beginning itself, and that can be given in the prompt. You don't need a full blown MCP based or fancy documentation mechanism.
Understood. Next up, we have I have heard AI can find bugs, but can it also figure out why the bug is happening, like the RCA part of it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is where, if I remember the earlier question, do we need to provide code base? In this scenario, it would be really helpful to provide the code base as well to identify that what was changed, what exactly the code is working on, and that becomes a full blown workflow based AI, where and then that's where multi agent systems come into picture. I know I'm using a little more fancy terms, but the idea is that you divide the tasks of AI agents into multiple things. One, AI identifies the bugs, passes it on to some other agent which understands the code base and does the RCA. And that's how we have been actually building our whole workflow, where multiple small agents and systems understand what is happening in the system, right? So it is absolutely possible.
Got it. So it's more of a companionship than the whole ownership of testing should go to that AI agent,
Absolutely.
right? Now we have two questions which are like pointing to the similar direction, so I'll just combine them. Basically, Sia and Khushi both want to know any beginner tools or platforms you want to start with, and which are not too complex. So, as a beginner in this QA domain, what are the should they start with automation tools or they should start with AI based testing tools where to get
I
started?
would I would always suggest start with automation tools. Build your understanding of the basics first. AI is a companion, is a tool which helps over the existing work which you are doing. So I would say whenever you're starting with, understand the core functionality or core frameworks, and to start with, Playwright for web testing is always going to help. It's simple. If you understand JavaScript, it is fairly simple to understand, nothing fancy. You can always start to understand what it does. For web testing, I'll just write it down. And for API testing, there are a couple of tools. One is Rest Assured for API testing, and there is another tool which everybody is anyways using uh, for API testing or API using for API calling APIs, which is Postman. Postman also gives you an option of writing test cases and working on it. So I think these 2 to 3 tools you should focus on getting an understanding really well. And why do I say that? Because coming back to the original question, if something goes wrong, how do we solve that? So if you don't have a good understanding, deep understanding of these tools, if AI goes wrong somewhere, you won't be able to fix those. So I would suggest start with these and then build over the AI side of it.
Awesome. I've dropped that in the chat box as well for their reference. Now, one last question that I can see in the chat is it too expensive to implement AI? Are only big tech companies implementing it, or startups are also able to afford and implement such AI use cases for testing and QA?
Startups are actually leveraging it much more than big tech, and I'll tell you why. Because startups move quicker, there is much less bureaucracy. Is it expensive? I would say it depends on how you are seeing the expense. For a startup, a production bug can actually mean that they lose consumer trust or a customer trust, because as a startup you are building customer trust, right? You are getting your customers. So every production issue, every bug is actually detrimental to that. So the impact is much higher. So the expense of having a production work versus actually using an AI tool to solve that is much lesser. Another aspect where AI actually helps startups, and startups are using it left, right, and center, is the fact that you can actually take a new feature much faster to your consumer in a such cutthroat market. Every startup that actually takes the feature to the customer end customer quicker actually has a much better chance of survival and doing well than say their competitors.
Sure thing. It's totally about the ROI in the end, that how much bandwidth you want to allot to that, and basically your product should be a good market fit if you are just getting started. So
Absolutely.
definitely that's great advice. Just one more thing I would like to add here, one of the common things which in your years of experience of reviewing the code, one common practice that developers avoid in general while they are writing the code, so something which a tester should start from while they are looking for bugs or reviewing code, like very common practices which every developer tends to forget or ignore.
I think it's there are a couple of things which developers tend to ignore. Uh, one is understanding the interface or the contract between the front end and the back end, and not covering everything. So usually how development more often than not happens is that you come together as team and decide that here is a contract which everybody will follow, where the front end guys will expect to call the API in a certain way, and the backend guys will provide the data in the certain way. And then they go their own ways and build something according to that understanding. Either way, something goes wrong, right? So the first bit is to always check if the integration between one system to the other system is actually working according to what was expected. That's a very common thing which happens, which can be tested upfront. The second most important thing, which is something which causes challenges, is that a lot of folks are able to think about the positive test cases of the happy scenarios, uh, but they are not able to think something which will fail in an obvious way. Giving a very simple example, our earlier API example, right? Or let's take a to do app example, right? uh, a developer would think about a creation, an update, a delete, but they would never think about the fact that whether my application should allow a blank, what do you call, task, right? And let's try doing that. Let me add a blank task. It allows a blank task, right? This is a clear misunderstanding. In real world, right? In real scenario, Does a blank task actually make relevance for a to-do app? Probably not, right? So I would say thinking from a customer perspective, right, rather than a specific feature and implementing it. Most of the developers are not able to get themselves in the shoes of an end customer and think from their life what they will try to do. And I think if you start thinking from an end customer perspective, from a product perspective, you will do wonders. If you start having the empathy of how the customer will work or will use the application, I think that is something which developers more often than not tend to miss.
Definitely. Also, we see this trend everywhere, like specifically in big companies that the product team builds a PRD, there are wireframes. Then while we are getting to UI, there's something different. There's like 20 to 30% loss of information that this is not feasible. This will be too heavy on the UI or the UX. Then after the Figma file goes to the developers, it comes out something different again. That as per the security protocol, this is something which will expose us to these basic measures. So finally, when we are getting to the actual product that user sees, and the PRD that was initially built is,
It's
I see
completely different.
like 30 to 40, or even at times 50% gap in what was initially brainstormed as a unicorn, and it turned out to be baby corn. So what do you think? How is it a bug, or is it supposed to be like that? It's ideal practice, or is this a way to optimize this?
So I think there is a way to optimize it, and I think there are a couple of things which I've ensured to do early in the planning phase itself. I think what happens is that even though we call ourselves agile in a lot of places, we are still working in a waterfall model, but in a 2 week waterfall model. And what happens is product builds something, passes it on to engineering, passes it on to QA. One way to solve for that is when some draft or something is created, all three areas, which are equally important areas of the system, right, which we usually call the product trio, the product person, the designer, and the engineering, which includes the developer and the QA, should sit together, discuss on the feasibility, and discuss should the system look like eventually. And here QA input is also equally important. If we are able to solve that problem in the initial stages of the system, then your PRD will be built in a more, and the wireframes will be built in a more realistic way. And then you will get closer to unicorn than a babycorn. So that is one way to solve. And hence, if you are a tester, don't wait for a developer to develop something and only then raise your issues. You should try to become part of and become a stakeholder very early in the planning phase itself as much as possible, and give your inputs there as well. And that is very important, and I've seen gives a lot of benefit to the whole cycle of the product.
Understood. Thank you so much for answering all these. That's all from the questions part. We can resume with the discussions.
Sure. So, because I'm not able to share anything else apart from my browser, so let me quickly share some screenshots of what happened in the using the Playwright MCP, and I'll paste few images. I'll show what AI did. So, what it did was that I gave it a prompt saying that there is a to-do app. Let's generate a suite of 5 test cases. So the same thing. It created a sort of a task checklist for itself, where it first decided to examine the to-do app and understand its UI elements, then create the Playwright test file structure, implement the helper functions, write the 5 test cases, and then run the whole thing. And here is where MCP comes into picture. It actually ran multiple tools automatically. It went to the browser using something called browser navigate, checked what is the browser type, did a click, and then went ahead and started understanding the application. Once it understood the application with multiple things like adding a task, updating a task, deleting a task, it did a tick on its first checklist. It understood the application. Then it started generating the code around the Playwright, and it started writing everything, and then it closed the browser. It then created a whole test suite where it had 5 test cases, which was first was adding a single task. One test case was updating a task, deleting the task, multiple task management, and then some edge cases like empty input, special characters, HTML context, and long text. Something which is expected from a QA to test with an empty input, special characters, HTML, few security things like HTML injection, SQL injection, added the right mechanism for anti-flaky stuff. And I'll quickly show the spec file which was generated automatically by the AI. And this is how it looks like, where it started writing test cases. It created certain selectors. Now, what are selectors? Selectors are basically HTML elements which need to be clicked or interacted with. So it could be a form where you need to enter value. It could be button which needs to be clicked. It could be a drop down which needs to be selected. So there are few elements which AI identified in our application. One was an input with a type task. One was a button, which is add task button. Another button, which was for update button. And then empty state heading. If you see about the empty state heading, this is the empty state heading, which it identified. And a table which gets created when you start adding tasks, right? The other bit, what it did was it went ahead and started writing test cases. I'll give you a simple example. It also added something called clear task, which are because I told it that every time you're starting a new test case, plus clear everything, start from a blank slate so that the previous test data doesn't actually cause my new test data to fail, right? So it is very important to sometimes you don't need to do that if you want to do a continuous test. But in our case, I wanted a clear slate every time a test starts, and that was the expectation. So it generated code for that using, say, something called delete link. And if I go in directly, what it does, it checks if the table has some tasks. So it goes to the page element of table, and it is still visible. Then it converts into a boolean of has table, and while it is still true, it starts deleting the links using the button delete, and it just clears everything. Now, it also has written some test cases. For example, the first test is around adding just one single task. Uh, then another test case, updating a task. Another one is deleting a task, managing multiple tasks, where it added 3 tasks: one high priority, one medium priority, one low priority, and then uh, they're handling the multiple inputs and the edge cases, where it is adding a task with special characters, with very long content, say 200 A's, some script alert, right? And whatever you would expect from your. So it's not only doing a typical simple testing, it is also adding edge cases. It is also adding few security related cases. By the way, your application shouldn't allow this at all, right? Because somebody could run code inside your system if this is being allowed. But that's a different probably session altogether. How to make clean applications so that people cannot do SQL or any script XSS injection. But this was all done within 5 minutes or 3 minutes. The idea is now we have a full blown suite where every time my application gets changed a little, we can run this suite or we can enhance this suite while the application is being built. Every time I can validate this and run this so that I am very sure that a new feature hasn't really broken what existed. And this is regression testing, which is also important because it is very much important that if somebody is building X feature, they might have actually broken something in Y feature. So you also have to ensure every time not to test just the X feature, but also ensure that the whole system is running as expected. And suite like these can solve for this. By the way, it's just 5 test cases, but I could ask it to generate a comprehensive test suite, and it will generate 150, 200 test cases with multiple things which are expected. Again, where does this come into picture? And I would also always reiterate, this will never cover everything in your system. But what it helps you doing is focus on the better parts of the system or the nuances of the system, and the basics can be covered by the AI, and more than basics rather. But you always have to ensure that you are not completely relying on this, always reviewing what is being generated. And apart from that, you're always working over and above what has been generated. So say there are multiple more test cases which you can now work on when the basics are being covered. So that's basically what I wanted to show for today, where we covered an API test case generation, API record and replay option using Kepler, and a test suite generation from your web application using Playwright and Playwright MCP. That's basically what I wanted to cover today.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Varun, for covering this whole automation bit. And that was quite detailed, I must say. It covered the stress testing bit as well. That A thing was for a normal tester, it will have to type the whole thing, but it did it in 5 minutes under the part of the script itself. So good thing for testers to speed up the whole process. And definitely worth learning experience. And people are already dropping a lot of comments. And the quiz is live for the session. We have it up till 3 p.m. running. It's available in the chat box. And thank you so much for the session today, Varun. And taking time over a weekend. People love the whole insightful bits that you have shared. And I'm sure a few of these would also try it out. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Avnish. Thank you.
All right. Lastly, audience, thank you so much for attending this session. This is the last and the finale session of this bootcamp. So, if you missed out on any bits, make sure you attend the quiz. And we have the launch video already up on Commudle's YouTube channel. And connect with the speaker. We have put up his LinkedIn profile in the chat box itself. Quiz is mandatory for you to get the certification, and I'll repeat it again. Basically, the rules for you to follow to get the certification part. You are supposed to attain all the session, that is session 1, 2, and 3. The two sessions were organized yesterday, and the finale session is organized today. And you are supposed to attain all the three quizzes for the respective sessions. You have to submit this bug reporting template by EOD today. You have to put your details here in this second sheet, and you have to put your bugs there. Replace this. This is a placeholder for a reference. You have to report your bugs in this format exactly. If you do not follow the format, this won't qualify as a bug. Further, you have to make a copy of this using here file and click on make a copy, and that's how you will further be able to access this file on your own system or devices. You won't be getting any edit access to this since it's a template. So yeah, all the best, and I look forward to your responses. And we'll be announcing the leaderboard as well as the winners in a day or two. So stay tuned, and till then, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.